Wow, haven't we had a really special morning? Have you just really sensed God's presence? He just wants to encourage you today, just refresh you, just give you back your strength and your hope, and just help you realign your focus on what's really important, and that is Him, and how He's for you. Yeah, we've had a really special time. And it's good to have everybody here. So welcome if you're visiting today. It's fantastic that you're here. We just hope that you really enjoy the service and that you feel really relaxed as a part of our church. And after church, we're going to have morning tea. We'd love you to stay and connect with us and have a cappuccino or something. That'd be fantastic. I think Vicky's doing cappuccinos today. So she's our new barista for the day, I think. So well done, Vicky. Good. Well, what I want to share about today, a few weeks ago, I shared how I feel like through all this pandemic and all that's going on, Satan is actually working, and he's trying to bring division and distraction and deception and disconnection and despair in our world. But he's also trying to sneakily bring that into our lives. He's trying to bring that into our hearts and our situations and our relationships and even our church. I think it's definitely shocked me how angry our world is. Has that shocked you? Yeah, I just don't think it was like this 10 years ago or even 5 years. Like I hear people and I'm just shocked at the lack of respect people have for other people, and just that nastiness that often comes through. And I think that we shouldn't get all down about it or just surrender to what Satan's doing, just thinking, well, the world's terrible and there's nothing we can do about it. As I shared a few weeks ago, I think that we as Christians can really stand against some of this stuff and launch a counter-attack with the opposite, with what Jesus would have us do, Jesus kind of actions. And so we can really work to build connection. Like, we should be really into connecting with people right now. If Satan's trying to disconnect, well, each of us can really work on bringing connection and having people over and having conversations with people and really working on getting yourself to places where you're connecting, and on standing on the truth of the word, and on being kind and focus, making sure our focus isn't distracted, but it's even more on Jesus and even more on the mission of Christ, which is to share our faith with others. And so this morning, I want to actually share an absolutely massive, massive way that we can counterattack what Satan is trying to do in the world, and particularly in our lives. And it's an area that is just so relevant in this season. And what I want to talk about is offence. We live in a world where it just seems like absolutely everybody, most of the time, is offended. And there is, that Satan's trying to stir up offence so that people get disconnected from each other, so people get disconnected from the church, from each other, from other Christians. So people are isolated. And so that's what I want to share about today. When we do life with people, actually before I get into it, I want to pray. Yeah, Lord, I just really thank you for your presence here with us this morning. And Lord, I just pray that you would just speak to our hearts today. Lord, we just want to be like Jesus, and we just want to be humble before you today, Lord. Just ready to hear your promptings on us. And Lord, just speak through your word today. Help our ears to be open, Lord. In Jesus' name, amen. Cool. So Jesus himself actually told his disciples that it is impossible that no offences should come. Luke 17, 1 to 1, I think it is. And when we do life with people, we've got to accept that sometimes we're going to get hurt. And that doesn't mean that we should isolate ourselves from people and never make friends and never form deep relationships because we're scared of being hurt. It's something that we know will happen sometimes, but we also know that God's going to help us through. It doesn't matter how thick-skinned you are or how hard you try to never upset anyone else. Sometimes we're going to experience hurt. Maybe someone has told lies or spread gossip about you, or someone's cheated on you or stolen from you. Maybe you've been rejected or abandoned or left out or abused or felt unloved. Some of these things that people can do to us can be absolutely terrible. Other times it's more of maybe the constant way that someone manipulates you or lets us down over time. And let's not be naive that we can and we will sometimes get hurt within our church family. It would be lovely if it never happened, but within a church, all of us aren't perfect, are we? And sometimes we're going to let each other down, and sometimes there will be things that hurt you. And that's because we go to church because Jesus is perfect, not because people are perfect. And so we're a family, and same way that in a family sometimes there's conflicts and disagreements. There will be in the church family, but we have Jesus as our head, and what I'm going to share about today is going to help with that as well. There are so many ways people can offend us in life, but there is an incredibly real danger to that, because so easily we can get entrapped by this. And this morning I have brought back my mousetrap. Some of you might remember the mousetrap from many years ago. Josiah's going to bring it out for us. Who's seen the mousetrap before? This is one of Rob's engineering feats. I'm not sure if you've ever had mice, or what's even worse, rats in your house. I absolutely hate mice in my house. Earlier in the year, out of the blue, we suddenly noticed the presence of a mouse up in a high cupboard. I still don't know how it got there. It's quite amazing. They can climb all sorts of things, can't they? They seem to be able to open cupboards that are closed. It's amazing. And I just hate the mess and the noise. Like, one little mouse can make so much noise. And you would know that I hate them if you ever looked in the roof cavity of our house, because scattered, you can't see the insulation in my roof. All you see is mouse bait. Because every time I hear a rattle, more mouse bait gets thrown from the manhole. And I have set a number of mouse traps in my life, but none like this. This is really like a Jurassic mouse trap, really. It would catch dinosaurs, I reckon. And I was going to bring a small one too, but I didn't. But anyway, you know what they look like. A mouse trap is a powerful weapon. And I would not want to be a mouse, because you come along and you smell cheese, and your eyes would be on that cheese, and you sniff, and then dead. Like, it's instant and really quite violent, isn't it? And the human trap that I'm speaking on today is also a hidden, subtle kind of trap. And most of us don't realise, just like a mouse doesn't realise that the trap's being laid out for them, most of us don't realise that there is a trap being laid out for us deliberately. And so that makes it even more dangerous. A trap has bait in it in order to lure the animal into the deadly jaws of the trap. and peanut butter or cheese work well for mice. Probably chocolate would, but who's going to put chocolate on a mousetrap? The trap that I want to speak about today is a trap that Satan lays out for us. And it is subtle, and it is hidden, and it is well baited. And it doesn't matter whether you've been a Christian a short time or you've been a Christian for many years, he keeps trying to use the same trap on us. And it's still subtle. And the deadly bait that he uses for this trap is offence. The Greek word for offend that's used in Luke 17:1 comes from the word scandalon. Do you know what scandalon means? Well, this is the scandalon. It's the part of the trap to which the bait is attached. So that is the scandalon of the trap. But that same word is used for offend. Offence is like the bait in a trap that Satan uses to bring people into captivity, which is incredibly scary, isn't it? So that means that every time that someone hurts you or offends you, it's like Satan is placing a big piece of cheese in a giant trap ready to trap you. And there isn't just one potential trap at a time. In fact, you are surrounded by many, many potential traps of offence, and we're all vulnerable to it. So what do we do to protect ourselves and to be freed from the trap? Well, today I just want to share with you 3 ways to keep your life from becoming trapped in offence. And the first one is to be alert for the trap. A mouse wouldn't come near a mouse trap if they knew what it was. And what happens, like often when we get hurt or offended, is at that moment, we actually don't realise that that is a trap set out for us. The hurt is so great, and so we focus on the wrong that's been done to us and on telling ourselves and others how we've been wronged, how we've been hurt. The latest fad now is to post it on Facebook, how we've been wronged and how we've been hurt, how it's not fair. And we can go on and on like that. And we can listen to those negative thoughts and we start to believe them, forgetting that Satan is actually trying to subtly whisper negativity into our thoughts and stir us up to be even more angry. And when we do that, our eyes are not being alert to look out for the offence trap. 1 Peter 5:8 says, "Stay alert, watch out for your great enemy, the devil. He prowls around like a roaring lion, looking for someone to devour." And it would be easy to automatically see what Satan was up to. Now, if it was easy to automatically see what Satan was up to, then the Bible wouldn't have told us to be alert. We live in the physical realm, but there's a spiritual realm as well. You have a God who loves you, but you also have an enemy. Ephesians 6:12 says, "For we are not fighting against flesh and blood enemies, but against evil rulers and authorities of the unseen world, against mighty powers in this dark world, and against evil spirits in the heavenly places." The physical dimension that we are living in can look relatively normal, while at the same time in the spiritual realm, there is evil launching an attack on our world. And a lot of the problems that we see in front of us and keep complaining about actually aren't the problem, because the battle isn't flesh and blood. We're not fighting people, but powers of darkness coming against us to bring disunity and conflict and chaos and brokenness. So the battle is not against our boss, or it's not against our parents or our children or our wife. It's definitely not against each other. And, that person might be saying or doing stuff that hurts or offends us, but we have to be alert and look at things from a spiritual perspective. The battle is not against flesh and blood. It's not with the person. Your battle is with the powers of darkness that are manipulating your situation. When we talk about Satan attacking Christians, we might get pictures of tanks driving, up the road. But that's not how Satan tends to work. He is a lot more effective at making, one person over there, feel left out, making another one feel like the first person is snobbing them, making this person feel really stressed and overloaded and resenting that no one's helping. And then, that person decides not to come to church because, no one seems to talk to them. And then, someone else is left feeling like, oh, I haven't got any friends here because that person's left. And, that's how he works. But we don't have to fear because we've got the power of the resurrection available to us through what Jesus did on the cross. He's given us his righteousness. We are his beloved. We know that his truth is the ultimate truth about us. Our identity is secure. Our purpose isn't dependent on other people's opinions of us or whether people like us. We're never alone because he will never leave us. Greater is he who is in us than he who is in the world. No weapon formed against us can prosper. We can complain about people when we have available to us amazing tools for breakthrough, like praying and standing on the word and declaring God's promises into our situations and speaking out blessings instead of cursing those who hurt us and being a maker of peace in the situation. It's actually incredibly powerful. I remember when I was working as a teacher, I had a supervisor who was incredibly hard to work with and who would treat me really badly. Like, she'd come into the class in front of all the kids and criticize what I was doing out loud, or I don't know, just pick on everything. She was really, really hard to work with. But I remember actually thinking, I'm going to try this out on her. And so I started praying blessings on her. I started forgiving her every time that she would, she'd do something, and then I'd consciously think, okay, I'm going to forgive. I started claiming God's favour in my life, and that lady did a total turnaround. She just changed over time. She softened. Her heart softened to me. And she actually then became my greatest advocate, that she would always be backing me up and saying good things about me. She actually wrote amazing reference that got me the job of student counsellor, like a leadership position at the school. And it was really, her reference was so good. It totally turned around, and it was amazing. My second point is don't lick the cheese. That's a deep and meaningful one. Can you remember that? Don't lick the cheese. The cheese, it cannot do anything to the mouse whatsoever until the mouse comes up and has a little lick. If we feed on the cheese, if we nibble on our offences, then we really will become offended. So when we've been wronged, of course the temptation is we'll dwell on that. We'll dwell on our hurts. We'll think about how wrong that other person's behaviour has been, how it isn't fair. When I was a student counsellor, there was a mother. This is one of my favourite stories. I'm sorry if I've told this one before, but there was a mother, and this is for real. She had a book in her handbag, and she would write down every time anybody wronged her or her child with a date and what had happened in detail. And she had pages and pages and pages of the stuff, and she'd just get out a little book and tell you all about it. And you might think that a lady's actions were pretty bitter and that a book like that could turn a child bitter. I thought that too, and I gently told her, and my name went into that book too. But I've kept a list of wrongs. Maybe I haven't written them out by hand, but I've kept them in my head, and I've replayed them over and over so I don't forget them. And I've brought that list up at times when something else has happened, and instead of just focusing on that one thing, I've remembered the whole list. And maybe you've done that too. And when we do that, really what we're doing, we're going lick, lick, lick at the bait of offence. My husband didn't hang his towel for 221 days in a row. Lick, that's not Rob. He's very good with his towel. And he never appreciates me. And he never notices when I'm hurting. And he always works too late. And it's like, lick. The church didn't care when I was sick. And they haven't noticed that I haven't been there for the last 5 weeks. And no one's contacted me. And lick. The wrongs committed against us can even become something we're kind of proud of. So easily, actually. It's weird, but it can become like a trophy of how bad we've been hurt, of what we've been through. It's really easy that we start to get some of our self-worth from how bad our life is. And it's sort of out of being a victim. There's actually a word for replaying hurts over and over in your mind. The word is resentment. And the word resentment literally means to cut yourself again. Every time we nurse an old wound, we're actually cutting ourselves again. And we all do it if we're not careful. And maybe it's because we want our hurt to be acknowledged, for someone to care that it isn't fair and to fix it. Well, do you know what I want to tell you this morning is that God cares. Remember what Jesus said? Are not the 5 sparrows sold for 2 pennies, yet not one of them is forgotten by God? Indeed, the very hairs on your head are all numbered. Don't be afraid. You are worth more than many sparrows. And Joel 2:25 says, and I will compensate you for the years that the swarming locust has eaten. God will compensate you for the trouble that you've been through. And you don't need to keep your list anymore, because God's actually keeping a list. It's just a different kind of list. Listen to this, it's beautiful. Psalm 56:8. You keep a track of all my sorrows. You've collected all my tears in your bottle. You've recorded each one in your book. Isn't that lovely? God knows better than anyone what has happened in your life. He knows better what was unfair and unjust and what's hurt you deeply. He knows the pain, and he has compassion on you. He sent his son Jesus not just to save us from our sins, but to free us from our hurts and offense, and free us from having to stay in bondage to the past. So first point is be alert for the trap. The second one, don't eat the cheese. And the third one is spit out the bait. Once a mouse is caught in a trap, it's pretty much all over for the mouse. But for a fish, it can be different. Many times I've been fishing and I've caught a snook in the boat at Kingston. And often when you catch one, you wind it in, you swing it over the boat, and you sort of let the line slack a bit. And what will happen is the fish will actually drop off and land in the bucket. And that, to me, is the ultimate kind of fishing, because you don't actually have to touch the fish and you don't have to get the hook out of its mouth. But the thing with that is what's actually happened is that the fish is only trapped to the fishing line because the fish's mouth is closed around the bait. The hook actually isn't emptied in at all. And that's so true for us as well. Galatians 5:1 says, it is for freedom that Christ has set us free. Stand firm and do not let yourself be burdened again by a yoke of slavery. So we can choose to be enslaved. If we're like that fish, we just want to suck on that bait, and we just like the taste, we just want to suck on it, but we're not prepared to open our mouth and just let that go. We're actually choosing to be enslaved. If the fish would just let go of the bait, they would have been able to swim off fine, but they had to hold on to the bait. And sometimes we want to hold on to that offense, and we don't want to let go. But God's saying, don't be enslaved. He has set us free. It was for freedom that Christ set us free. He doesn't want us enslaved to that offense anymore. He wants us free. So we've actually got to choose to let go of our offenses and forgive and live in that freedom that Christ won for us. Unforgiveness actually doesn't hurt the person who offended us. It hurts us. Someone once said that harboring unforgiveness is like drinking the poisonous bitter punishment that we intend for someone else. You see, the trap of offense isn't just a minor thing, it's incredibly dangerous. Any mouse that thinks to itself, I'm just going to lie here for a while because, I just deserve to be able to eat a little bit of this cheese. I have a right to be offended for a while. I've got, this is pretty bad. Like, anyone would want to keep lists on this one. This is pretty serious. And, we can just, lie there next to the cheese. Any mouse that's going to think that is going to be a dead mouse. Offense sucks your peace from you. It hinders you from happiness that you were meant to experience. It can keep you from the purposes and future you were meant to have and affect all your relationships, even with people that have nothing to do with that offense. It can even make you sick. Jesus was quite clear about it. He simply told us, forgive one another. Spit out the bait. Just do it. Spit it out. And not just to forgive, but in Luke 6, he says, I say love your enemies. Whoa, that's really in the Bible. That's something Jesus really said. That's full on, isn't it? Love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who hurt you. Now, I don't know about you. Maybe, this is normal for you, but for me, that is not my natural response when I'm offended. They're definitely verses that no one would want stuck on the fridge as a fridge magnet because it would probably help with your diet. You wouldn't want to go to the fridge as often, would you? Sometimes we ignore verses like that or just brush over them. That's a nice little saying. Or convince ourselves that they don't apply to our real life situations. But actually, Jesus intended, when he said that, he intended that we would really apply that it would be part of our real day-to-day, Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, that we would actually walk our lives out in that way. And Jesus himself role modeled that to us. He walked in that way. 1 Peter 2:23 says, he did not retaliate when he was insulted, nor threaten revenge when he was suffered. He left his case in the hands of God, who always judges fairly. I love that bit about leaving our case in the hands of God, leaving God to be the fair judge in our situation. Can we trust God with it? Can we trust God that he would be the fair judge for us? Most of you have heard this part of my testimony before, but I just want to briefly share it just to finish this morning because it relates to this message. When I was in my 20s, I was married for the first time. I've been married previously. And we dreamt of a happy life and a future together. But as we started to build our marriage, he started to get terrible suppressed memories from childhood and suffered severe mental illness. And things started to become really, really crazy. And if I look back at that now, it's like this movie that doesn't even seem like it's that I was involved in it. It's just like this weird movie. But somehow I ended up in the middle of this real life nightmare. And it really was like Satan was full on aiming for the kill and not relenting for a moment. Anyway, gradually things got more difficult. And one day after 5 years of being married, the guy that I totally loved and I thought I would be married to for the rest of my life, walked out on me and walked out of our marriage. And I was just so broken and so devastated. He told me that he didn't know who he was, and he said that he didn't love me anymore. And the grief that is involved in having your husband or wife walk out of your marriage like that, that is, it's just totally overwhelming. And I was really left with my faith in ruins. Like, where is God in all of this? I had to make a choice. Where either I gave up or I choose to give into painful growth and determined that freedom and intimacy with Jesus would be my one win from this whole situation. And one of the hardest challenges was forgiveness. I had stuck by my husband for 5 years. I'd remained faithful through the most terrible of times. I had supported him through sickness and abuse. I had forgiven and kept loving and helping. And yet after all that, he had simply decided to leave. And it wasn't just forgiving him that was hard. There were many other people who'd badly hurt me through this process. People who didn't stand up and fight for me, and my marriage professionals who gave destructive advice, people who actually encouraged him to leave, people who didn't take the risk to care, others who made judgments about me and spread gossip that wasn't true. I knew what the Bible said about forgiveness, but how do you let go when people have hurt you so bad and deserve to be punished? And probably what I struggled with the most, how could a God who loved me let this happen? I'd prayed from the time I was 12 that God would lead my decision about who to marry. Surely he could have protected me. I never wanted a divorce. I fought harder than anyone could possibly imagine to keep our marriage together. I read the right books. I got counselling. I prayed all night some nights. I tried to be obedient to God. I'd fasted, worshipped, kept believing, and finally I'd lost. How do you forgive God for that? I certainly didn't want to. I certainly didn't think it was fair. How come I was the one who'd been broken and yet I'm the one who has to go through more pain to forgive? I was really struggling not to get bitter and twisted. But somehow, little by little, God helped me to face my feelings and forgive. And it wasn't a quick process. It was like each day there was something to work through, someone to forgive, something practical to do, healing to be done, counselling or prayer ministry or all sorts of things that I walked through over that time. But out of all that story, that life-wrecking disaster that somehow ended up being my life story, I experienced the most miraculous healing and freedom. There is something incredibly powerful about forgiveness. And I'm talking about gutsy, real-life forgiveness, real-life circumstances, real hurts, real disappointments, and real letting go of them. How do you forgive? Well, I learned a 3-part process. Number 1, be honest, totally honest with God. Release to him all your emotion. Tell him everything that you've been through, everything that you've been hurt by. Second thing, then choose to release your right to judge and punish and give God the responsibility to work it out. And thirdly, decide to forgive and not to replay or relive. Bitterness may well up again within you, but you just keep repeating that process over and over because bit by bit it will get easier. And if you get really stuck, then that's why we've got a church family, that you can find someone, a Christian that you trust that can pray and help you, and definitely a Christian counsellor. We have to spit out the bait. So we've got be alert, which is watching out for offence when it comes. Don't lick the cheese, so don't keep those lists or keep playing the offence. And thirdly, spit out the bait. Forgive it, let it go. Jesus is not half-hearted about forgiveness. There is no, it's okay to wait until you feel like it or wait until they've said sorry. Or forgive when they deserve it. Now, Jesus is totally for forgiveness. He's totally definite on it. And thank God for that. Because Jesus is actually so passionate. He's so one-eyed for forgiveness that he actually gave his life for it. Now, he died so that we could receive forgiveness. Now, we can't receive the gift of forgiveness without letting that same forgiveness overflow to everyone else. Ephesians 4:32 says, be kind to each other, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, just as God through Christ has forgiven you. You know, we don't have to forgive out of our own strength. We just receive the forgiveness that we've been given by God, and we just let that overflow to others. And do you know what I've found is that no matter how deep the hurt that I've experienced throughout, different hurts throughout my life, that God's love has always been deeper. So, have you been offended recently? Now, is there some people that you've got some lists about that have started to build up? It's good to think about this quite regularly because, sometimes we know about forgiveness, but then it can start to build up again, can't it? We don't need to tell everyone this morning, but this morning, I encourage you to tell God. We can't do this on our own. We really need to know God's forgiveness for us, and we need to then let that flow so that we can forgive others. Let's all stand. We're just going to have a song just to finish with today. And as we sing, I just encourage you just to be open to God. Tell him, those things that you know. Listen as he shows you the people that you need to forgive today. And we just want to open the front too, that if people would like prayer, that they can come forward and we'll just pray for you this morning. And just pray. We're just believing for a real release of that burden. Maybe you've been carrying it for many years. God doesn't want you to carry it anymore. He wants you to spit that bait out. Let it go. He's got freedom for you. He's won freedom for you. And so I encourage you to come forward and get prayer. And maybe you're feeling today that you don't even know this Jesus we're talking about. You might like to come forward too. And today might be the day that you would like to open your heart and become a Christian for the first time. And we'll pray for anyone that would like that as well, if you just come forward.
God is for me. Your ear is listening. I'm safe in your love. Your army of angels watch over me. You're always present. You're always with me. For all of my life, your favor has followed. You're my covering. I have never walked alone. I've never been abandoned. You are my inheritance. You are my strength and shield, and I have confidence. You go before me. You are my deliverer. I know I never walked alone. You're always faithful. You're strong and able. I'm lifting my head, in you I find hope. You're my